Today, I think the Indian startup ecosystem is in a major growth phase, right? But if you really look at who is going to be the main driver for this, who's the protagonist in the entire show that's actually happening today, it's the entrepreneurs, right? The startup founders.
This is a national asset. Top brains are, they are spending time chasing funds rather than thousands of lost lab research hours in top fields.
Risk appetite is something that people have some inherent levels, right? I mean, there are investors who are risk loving, and there are some investors who are risk averse, right? And if you really look at startup as an asset category, it has a certain level of risk, right? So naturally, it might not appeal to all kinds of investors. We have been able to provide it at a price point where even people from smaller towns are able to access these products and services that we are doing, right?
Sir, I'm really glad. Thank you for taking out time, because what you're doing is a part of big journey. A lot of student entrepreneurs, startups, they are kind of struggling. Some of them are not able to get the right kind of money and they're migrating out of the country. So in my understanding, what you're doing is a service to the nation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So it's a matter of great honor. I am here in IIT Chennai with Professor Thillai Rajan, sir. Thank you, sir, for giving time on a very short notice.
Thank you. I think it's been a pleasure, and thanks for taking the initiative to be able to kind of discuss the work that we are doing. It's very nice of you to come out to IIT and look at what we are doing.
There is no better place than probably where it all started. We are in the room of Professor Thillai Rajan, and you can see it's all lot of paperwork, a lot of presentations, and everything is there. So the kind of hard work it takes to produce a platform like YNOS. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm first curious about the name YNOS. What does it stand for?
Frankly, it doesn't stand for anything. It's just a name that we thought for ourselves. So when we think of a name, we felt that name has to do two things. One is it should be short, and it should obviously be not be already around for some time. And then it should also have a feeling that people should be able to recollect very quickly, right? So when we thought of a suitable name with this criteria, then we struck on this name. And then, so we've been using this for a while now. Yes.
Okay, great. Sir, startup ecosystem is booming, but tier ones, they're doing 80% of startups are coming from tier one, and we have so many, startup challenges, IDEX, then TDF, then incubation centers, Atal Innovation Mission. So there is a whole lot of effort by the government to tap into the potential of our young people. Platforms like Traction, Statista, and now I know about also of YNOS, they are doing a very interesting work on getting the data points which perhaps did not exist. So what was the value proposition that you went in, or you found the gap? Which was the ideology or the driving force for your engine?
No, thank you so much. As you rightly mentioned today, I think the Indian startup ecosystem is in a major growth phase, right? But if you really look at who is going to be the main driver for this, who's the protagonist in the entire show that's actually happening today, it's the entrepreneurs, right? The startup founders. I mean, there are other important components of the ecosystem, like investors, like the other enabling environment, the mentors, the laboratories, and so on and so forth. But then ultimately, I think the main epicenter of the entire ecosystem is actually the startup founders. So what we realized is the startup founders function under a lot of constraints. One is they are young, and then they will have to do multiple things at the same time. They will have to possibly do the development, they will have to do the marketing, they will have to hire talent, they will have to seek fundraising, and so on and so forth. So they don't really have what is called as a bandwidth, and they are also operating under a lot of capital and resource constraints. So that's when we realize that can we do something for these entrepreneurs so that they will be able to in some way make the whole process of scaling up a lot more quicker. So that's when we sell that the information is very critical in the early part of the startup journey. So as you rightly mentioned, there are other information sources that provide information of the startup ecosystem, and what we have been trying to do at YNOS and also at IIT Madras. So there is a significant difference in terms of what we are trying to do and whom we are trying to address the requirement of. Right? So generally, if you look at the ecosystem, the most common information that gets captured is a transaction information. Okay, so that means which company has received investment from which investor, when did they receive the investment, what is the quantum of investment, at what valuation they have received. So those are the normal transaction information that gets captured. But then we realize that we need to give information that is very different, and we need to target something for the entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs have not been able to leverage some of the existing sources. One, because they were not accessible in terms of cost, and second, they did not provide information that the entrepreneurs needed. So when we conceptualized YNOS, our first thing is, can we have the entrepreneur first in our mind? Okay, can we start looking at providing information that the entrepreneur would find it important? For example, entrepreneur would find the investor information very important. Who are the different investors? Where are they investing? What are the investment preferences? At what stage of the company they are investing? Is there a syndication that they are normally investing with? So those are the information that the entrepreneur is looking for, right?
I have another question to add into this. As you define the number of parameters, the number of permutation and combination between the investor-founder interactions keep on multiplying with every dimension that you added. And most of young founders probably will not be able to grab those parameters on which they have to operate till probably spending 1.5, 2 years of just rubbing their heels into the fundraising playground. So my question is that in this whole kind of big arena, the number of interactions are too high and the successful outcomes are limited. In one of your interviews, you said that in a average venture capitalist or large size venture capitalist fund, there are 20,000 applications and they invest in 50 companies. So which means to say that per successful outcome, the number of applications, the number of interactions are too high. How does YNOS kind of fine tune this so that we don't spend an average 18 to 20 months, in deep tech startup, by which the opportunity window might have been gone? How does YNOS kind of filter through this information and make the bonding or the coupling happen faster?
I think it's a very good question that you are looking at. So I think you are talking about how do we cut through the time that it takes. See, fundamentally, there are two major actors, right? We're talking about investors, and then we are talking about entrepreneurs. An investor would like to see more number of startups whether it takes a final investment decision, right? The example that you cited is, okay, they see thousands of companies and then they maybe invest in a handful of maybe tens or hundreds and so on. But then for an entrepreneur, as you rightly mentioned, the entrepreneur would like to meet as few an investor as possible and conclude the investment transaction, because I think that gives them an opportunity to focus on the business, focus on the operations and so on. So what we have done is, one is we have given the entire the basket of investors that are operating in the country to the entrepreneurs. The second is how do we ensure that we are able to recommend the most suitable investors for that particular startup. So this is where we have developed an AI-based recommendation engine, where we have taken findings from some of the top research that's actually happening in terms of how investors prefer on what kind of startups to invest in. And we have used those findings, and then based on that recommendation engine, we're able to recommend a very short list of investors to the startup, right? So the startups don't have to necessarily skim through the entire list of thousands of investors, or they should not actually go for what is called as a trial and error approach, where they reach out to investors who are not suitable, right? See, ultimately what happens is every negative response an entrepreneur gets, it shatters his confidence, right? And an entrepreneur should actually try and get his positive decision as quickly as possible, right? So that's what we are trying to do.
So you are saving the entrepreneur's fuel
Yeah,
to the point of destination.
yes, we kind of save his confidence, we kind of save his time, we kind of save his effort, right? And then try and ensure that he meets the right set of investors so that he can conclude the transactions possible.
So I have a question, since I do a little bit of economic research on myself and I think of everything as national asset, like what is the time every year, how much startups are coming out of the country, what kind of startups, what are their valuation, how much they're adding to the GDP. Sir, the question is that in this chase of founders, looking for investment, countless thousands of hours are spent. So now this is a serious question, that should there be an agency that should be looking into how much time the founders are spending. Could there be a yardstick like a clock, how we have in World Chess Championships, that you kind of tap the button to map your journey, because this is a national asset. Top brains are, they are spending time chasing funds rather than thousands of lost lab research hours in top fields. And even if 5% of founders every year get disappointed, we probably lose a couple of $100 million. So do you think it's a national asset and it should be seen with a lot more seriousness? And can you incorporate this in your powerful engine?
Okay, I will actually ask you a question in response to that. So in day-to-day life, in our normal life, right? So we encounter a lot of friction. Okay, is friction beneficial or not?
Is friction beneficial? I didn't come prepared for.
Okay, fine.
No, but I love to be caught off guard. So, friction polishes young minds. It tells a young mind. So, one of the reasons we call somebody naive and mature is the way they deal with friction, the way their personality gets polished in the process. So, some amount of friction is necessary, but it also decides your resilience. Some people, can probably walk out of the field without delivering. So please.
No, I think you have hit the point very rightly. See, whenever if you're looking at a financial transaction, as I rightly mentioned, there are certain transaction costs that needs to be incurred. Okay. In a friction-free world, as we all know, motion is so smooth and it takes a lot of time and effort to control motion. But in a friction world, it's a lot of things are beneficial. For example, a diamond gets shaped up because of friction, right? So to a certain extent, I think the transaction costs are important because they have a very important role to play in the entire process, right? But what we have to try and do is that we have to try and keep it at a level where it is optimum. Okay, the transaction cost should not be too high. I mean, right now, like you are mentioning, it's possible that the transaction cost could be very high, that it deters certain people, right? Because it takes too much of effort. But at the same time, we cannot make it completely hassle-free, because then it actually, in some sense, makes capital easily available for entrepreneurs. That is also not a very good thing.
I totally gather this point, but I was not talking in binary 0, 1. So I'm like percentage, 5% of time saved here. If a startup through YNOS, I would just recommend that if there is a way of mapping how much time a founder has saved and how much time you have saved annually by people going onto your platform, that will definitely attract the attention of, agencies, government agencies, institutions. I'm very sure this is happening, but if we attach a time stamp to it, we will be able to probably see how much we've fast-tracked the valuation of startups.
I think you have good terms. So time taken is multiple things. Times taken in terms of getting the information about the investors. So that is one set of time. The second time is in terms of approaching the investor and waiting for a response from them. That's the second category. And the third category is to analyze and then find out who are the suitable investors. The time taken for analysis itself, that's taken a little bit of time. So if you're really looking at multiple components of time that it takes the entire fundraising process, what YNOS does is dramatically cuts the time taken in the fundraising process, particularly in a few activities. For example, information, right? Earlier, people used to spend months in finding out who are the investors. Right? Today, possibly they would need about 10-15 minutes to gather the entire list of investors.
So if a founder with 10 team members doesn't have to probably fund their expenses while he is looking, that's amazing. That's amazing. Few lakh rupees I can simply think save.
All this costly analysts to scan the market, find out who is investing, where they are investing, it's completely eliminated, right? Then the second is the analysis, right? You will have to again employ some analysts to find out, okay, which should be an investor that they should approach. So again, we have developed an AI-based tool where looking at the venture preferences, looking at the founder backgrounds, looking at the investor backgrounds, we're able to recommend the most appropriate investor that they can start with. Okay. So this again saves time in the entire analysis process. So the kind of time saving is phenomenal that we have been able to achieve.
Okay. So I'm going to throw in a very interesting, I would say, aspect. And you might want to give me a 2% stake if you want to do it. West is all about giving accreditations, creating tiers, tier 1, tier 2, giving accreditation, ratings and all this. So is YNOS thinking of coming up with its own rating where things become far simpler, like, a rating from Zomato to movie to IMDb to everything? Is YNOS thinking about a rating setup to kind of further standardize things a little bit?
Because we have not really looked at what is the objective of such a rating. Usually rating has an objective. If it's a credit rating, people look at the quality of the company in terms of the ability to pay the loans taken. So that is one. And then you have ratings in terms of the customer rating, satisfaction rating. So there are several objectives behind any of these ratings. I think you have raised a very important point and also suggestion as well. So we need to first of all find out, if you start doing a rating, what should be an objective, right?
Okay. So here is I think I'll follow it up because I have some questions written. A lot of VCs, if you go to traditional business family houses, they're like, oh, we don't invest in startups, we invest in stocks because 92% startups fail. So it's like labeling all startups, everything in one picture, and nothing is in one picture. I mean, me and you both are wearing a shirt. Our friend here, Pawan, is also wearing a shirt, but these are 3 different shirts, So startups are not the same. So how YNOS can help to with your platform Delphi, and the other one is called World?
It's a valuation platform.
Okay.
Valuation. Okay.
So how does YNOS with its other tools help to sector agnostic or possible investors to kind of have a better clarity that all startups are not the same, and here we are giving you tools to further understand, educate themselves before investing. So how does it help? Because I think there is a fantastic opportunity also for possible investors to get into the ring of funding.
I think risk appetite is something that people have some inherent levels, right? I mean, there are investors who are risk loving, and there are some investors who are risk averse, right? And if you really look at startup as an asset category, it has a certain level of risk, right? So naturally, it might not appeal to all kinds of investors because, people who have a certain amount of risk appetite, they will actually gravitate towards investing in these kind of assets. I think what is critical now is to see, can we really facilitate a channel where we can have easy mechanism where people who have an appetite for that category can easily access the asset classes, right? That I think is important. Now, who are the people who like this kind of asset classes? If you really look at global examples, traditionally, people who have been successful entrepreneurs, they have that kind of risk appetite, right? Successful startups, right? Startup founders. So they have that risk appetite. And people with that risk appetite, they start, investing in startups, right?
So I'll go back to one of the phrases that you that you gave in YouTube conversation, and I'll come back to the definition of risk. Marriage between intuition and process. This is what you shared. So don't you think risk and understanding of risk is also a marriage between intuition, like perceived risk, and through the risk, through the process, we can kind of mitigate the risk. So don't you think risk also can be seen as opportunity is marriage between intuition and process? Risk could also be a combination of intuition and process.
Yes, I think people look at handling it at a very multiple levels, right? For example, in a recent program that I did, I looked at how investors tend to look at risk, right? Do they look at it in a very rational way? Or do they have certain biases which they may want to look at it with a little bit of an emotional element to it, right? So people handle risk in a very different way. For example, there are certain investors who want to contribute to the place where they are coming from, to their native areas. And there are some entrepreneurs who possibly are coming, with interesting ideas from their native area, they're willing to support, right? And in such cases, what they do is they may not use the same discipline of very hardcore financial rationality when they make a decision, right? They see that, okay, I want to contribute something to my native place. I want to contribute something back to the place I originate from. So they kind of look at evaluating this very differently. Second, I think there are certain entrepreneurs who still want to support because it fits into their value proposition. Okay, it may not really be very strong in terms of making financial sense, but they still want to go ahead and do it because they want to kind of associate with the idea that has been, that the entrepreneur is looking for, right? So these are some of the ways in which, we're talking about this intuition and process. Yeah.
Okay. So in one part, you just said that some of the people will take additional risk just to go back and give to the place where they come from. So is Zoho what is coming to your mind when you say this? I mean, or there are more examples, and how YNOS is helping create innovation out of tier 1 cities. Do you have some examples to cite where YNOS has a record of supporting initiatives which are out of tier 1 cities? I mean, do you recall some such fundings that got processed through YNOS?
So first of all, we are an information platform, and one of the objectives that we want to look at as a part of the information platform is to see how we can actually provide this information to people what we call as disadvantaged areas, right? And as you rightly mentioned, tier 2 and tier 3 are those cities where there are a lot of disadvantages because networks are not easily available. People, we don't really have top tier institutions in many of these smaller towns, so that the alumni, which is a very powerful network in terms of connecting entrepreneurs and investors, that is not available, right? So we said that, okay, can we really make this information available to these entrepreneurs and founders who are in these very far-flung locations? And we have been able to achieve that in a certain way because I would say at least about 40-50% of the subscribers are from some of these smaller towns, right? They're not from the larger towns, right? Okay. And then we have been able to provide it at a price point where even people from smaller towns are able to access these products and services that we are doing, right? So in a way, I think that has been our contribution in terms of how we can remove or how we can make a level playing field, at least as far as information is concerned, between tier 1 founders and founders in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, right? So today, as a result of our platform, tier 3 founders have the same level of information as what possibly a tier 1 founders will have. Right?
That's amazing. That's fantastic. So without subscribing to expensive Forbes subscription and this, that, so many, they can only just come to YNOS and get everything that they...
All right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need to get the subscription myself then. Yeah. Okay. So I'm a big fan of intuitive wisdom. And Chennai, where we are sitting, Tamil Nadu, I think is a special hub of a special kind of intuitive processing of information, and I was doing some research on S. Ramanujan. Uh, how can we use YNOS to tap or identify, because I think that you are working with a lot of institutional partners like NASCOM, 10,000 startups. So are you also doing something to identify, to reach out to some such places and to look for talent? Because talent is equal to GDP for me today. Right talent, whether it's groomed or it's not groomed, we need to find out and we need to groom them to add, because that is what is going to take us to $10 trillion.
Exactly.
So is YNOS or it's one of its partners considering such initiatives?
In terms of identifying
Talent, not just sometimes, because I read that one of your platforms is into mentoring, or giving coaching or subject matter experts to founders. So from which part are you starting to handhold a startup? Is it like when it reaches you and they want to have subject matter experts, for example? Or you try to penetrate with your partners down into the roots?
I think it's a good question. India has invested phenomenally in higher education institutions, right? And particularly, you mentioned the state of Tamil Nadu. State of Tamil Nadu has some of the top-notch education institutions, including here I have to mention IIT Madras is a top-ranked institution in the country, right?
It's fantastic, yeah.
But somehow what happens is people are overwhelmed, right? When they are trying to reach these education institutions, right? They think that they are all very big organizations. They are very hesitant in terms of whom should they approach, which doors they should knock. And they're also kind of, in some sense, not sure whether, they being very small founders or they being very small SMEs, will they be entertained, in this kind of very large institutions? So what we try to create as a part of that, Delphi platform is to see how we can break open this artificial barriers that exist between very highly qualified scientists and then the people who need to access this expertise, and then say, okay, no, today we are possibly creating an avenue where you can find out who are the people, because sitting at IIT Madras, I am fully aware that there are many faculty members who want to contribute to some of these fledgling initiatives that are actually happening in some of the small tier towns, but they don't have the time, they don't have the bandwidth to kind of identify those talent. They don't have the bandwidth to kind of go ahead and seek which are the ones that they could mentor. So what we decided was we kind of created, in some sense, an information repository where the faculty members will express their interest and their area of expertise, and then the SMEs, the startups, and all of them, they can actually look at the expertise that exists in some of the top institutions and they can reach out to them, right? So that is something that we have been able to create.
Wonderful. So is it like only IIT professors or like couple of IITs that you're a partner of, partnered with YNOS, or it is open to any professor from any institution across India or a subject matter for instance to enroll themselves on this platform?
We have made a beginning with the IIT Madras faculty simply because of the access to the IIT ecosystem that I have being part of IIT Madras. But our objective is to really kind of delineate the institutional affiliation of the experts and then say anybody who would like to offer something that can in a way connect and benefit the whole ecosystem in the country are most welcome. And we believe that it should not be restricted to only people from the academia. It should also be including people from the industry, right? Because industry people also have a lot to offer to the entrepreneurs in technical areas, right? They may want to possibly look at are the problems being addressed properly? What are the practical challenges that the entrepreneur should consider when they're doing the product development process and so on, right? So it's something, a platform that we started with faculty members, with some of the top institutions of the central government and state government institutions, but we would like to widen it over a period of time and also include people from the industry as we go along.
Okay, perfect. So here is the question that India's R&D spend has been one of the lowest, over the last 3 to 4 decades, and a lot of businesses think that the kind of money they can squeeze out without thinking of R&D is probably the profit. That psyche is there. There was a point when we thought taxes is something that we can squeeze out by not paying taxes. R&D has been there. So do you believe inherently that startups are India's savior for this 3-4 decades of stagnation in R&D? Is my first question. And should family MSMEs like between 100 to 500 CR should be investing actively in the startups just to kind of get their R&D quotient up?
I think it's an interesting question. I mean, R&D naturally has several segments. So there is the fundamental R&D, and then there is translational R&D, and then we also need R&D that looks at taking it to the market and so on and so forth, right? See, significantly R&D investment has to really come from the government. I mean, that's been the trend overall. I mean, I'm not talking about developing countries, but even developed countries, much of the R&D development, the initial stages, has actually been supported by the government. I think in recent years, Indian government has really taken it up in such a way that and creating a lot of mechanisms whereby government funding is channelized through high impact R&D projects. So the next step I think that is needed to be done is that, okay, can we create mechanism where we can co-invest, right? For example, can the government funding attract, right? That is, can it crowd in private sector funding as well? But then the catalyst is the government funding that actually happened, but then can the catalyst create a little bit of crowding in from other sources as well? I think that is what today it's actually happening. For example, in many of the direct startup schemes as well, I think the government funding is expected to get in adequate amount of private sector funding, for example, IDEX and all of these things, which is not really R&D, but then it involves a little bit of translational R&D or it involves a little bit of go-to-market R&D. The idea is, can we catalyze private sector funding? I think that is going to give great results in the future.
Okay. So I will come back to the question again because I think I want to dissect it a little further. That the sluggishness of India's MSME sector, which is kind of R&D averse, even if they have pockets to support some amount of R&D. Post-COVID, they have seen the fragility of their own existence because supply chains got shaken up, and if there are 2-3 clients, one of these clients close, they lose 20, 30, 40% of their revenue. And as a consequence, many family-run businesses, they closed down. So do you personally believe that family-run businesses, because MSMEs are around 3/4 or 2/3, between 2/3 and 3/4 of all economies globally, something should be done for ensuring the health of the MSME sector across all industry vertical? Because if MSME is running in a sizable turnover, 100, 200, 300 CR, they themselves are comfortable. So family-run business MBA started to be done. But do you think that they need to start considering investing into startups which are close to them to kind of have a fresh business cycle? So not venture very far away from the domains they are, but kind of couple up with the startup of their interests. Because if a VC is investing into a startup, it makes more sense for a 3-decade, 4-decade, 5-decade old family business, which might be on the brink of closure, to invest and have a fresh lease of life. What is your thought on this?
I think we are seeing several developments in that area. As you rightly mentioned, MSMEs belong to an asset class that's a little bit different from startups, right? They are asset rich, and then they are more tangible assets driven kind of a business, a mature market, steady growth, rather than the high growth and the innovative businesses that startups are characterized by. Increasingly, what we are seeing is that the second generation of such family-owned MSEs, because of their greater degree of exposure, they actually want to kind of get into startups rather than being attached to the traditional model of the family business. And when they do that, either they kind of start something that's aligned to their existing business, or they start something that's completely different. Okay, so that's a big advantage, because having come from a business background, their business acumen is possibly, a lot more sharp than somebody who's possibly, completely new to the business, right? So they have a very sharp business acumen. And now they have the inclination to get into something that's innovative, something that's technology, something that's having a high growth prospects. So the chances of them becoming more successful is higher because of their business background, right? And because they also coming from a reasonably well-off families, they could also bring in initial investment as well. And I think this will give a lot of comfort to subsequent venture investors to invest in these businesses. And an investor will be more comfortable in investing in this standalone businesses rather than investing in the MSME, simply because the scope for wealth creation in this new innovative business can be much faster.
My question, I think I need to correct my question, probably I got it wrong. Is that, let's say a second generation family owned business person is there and he wants to innovate in business. Is it not one of the easiest bet for him to look for startups which are close to his parental business and to invest in them, to partner with them? That was my question.
Well, I think it works either way, right? For example, sometimes people would prefer to doing it on their own. Sometimes they would prefer to invest it. Not only SMEs, I think there are many companies which are now looking at startups as a way to partner on very innovative projects. Larger companies are doing it. Today, the open innovation model of doing business is becoming more and more accepted because many companies find that instead of working on innovation within their company, working with startups can actually be a lot more beneficial in terms of cost or in terms of avoiding the risk associated with failure, right? So that can very well happen in SMEs as well.
So if you think that there is value in this, would you want YNOS to be a change agent in that sector?
So right now, you would possibly want to take it step by step. Our first opportunity today is, as you rightly mentioned, we are talking about a 5 trillion, 10 trillion market, right, India GDP. And if you assume that startups and innovative businesses are going to contribute about 30% of it, right? And if you really look at the information requirements for this business, even at a very, very conservative estimate of 1% of the economy as being the information requirement, we are talking about a phenomenally large market size of information requirement for the innovation economy, right? So YNOS is squarely positioned right now to address primarily the requirements of this information economy, right? Our next step is to really look at, getting into transactions where we are able to kind of bridge, right? But I think that is going to, frankly speaking, it is going to take some time because we still believe that we have a lot more to offer in terms of making information available for this new age ecosystem.
Thank you. My two questions. 3,500 Indian millionaires are set to leave India. That's because we are trying to get FDI and all this, but this information which is not very positive. So if we have to target a segment, okay, these are the people we want them to invest their wealth because they are going to most likely invest in the country they're going to move to. So 3,500 millionaires is going to be like a few $1 billion worth of capital moving out of the country. How can your platform and with your experience also in the VC ecosystem, what would you recommend government institutions or participating institutions who should be concerned about it? What should they do to, because there are countries which are trying to invite wealth and here we are. So we can invite wealth and we can stop our wealth from being, exiting. What would you like to recommend, for this to stop? Do they need more understanding on potential of Indian startup sector so that they know that there are very great returns? That's the reason foreign VCs are investing, foreign LPs are investing in India. Does this information need to reach them or is there some other mechanism which is altogether missing?
People migrate, travel to different countries for a variety of reasons. I mean, people don't stick for a particular country for investment opportunities, right? People go there for plenty of reasons, right? But today, we're really looking at a global world where capital flows across national boundaries in a very seamless manner, okay? I think that is a situation that people would want to have. Even wherever they are across the globe, I think if they want to contribute to India, we should create a mechanism where capital flows fairly seamlessly to the entities that they would like to invest in. Okay, I think this is where we need significant amount of strengthening that needs to happen. If you look at the Indian angel investors today, I would say about 25% of the Indian angels are investing from overseas, right? That's not a small number. That's a large number, right? And if you're also looking at the VCs, I mean, until about 5-6 years ago, 90% of the capital was from global investors, not Indian investors. But today the situation has slightly changed, but still significantly about 60-70% of the capital that's coming at global capital, right? So the presence of investors in India is desirable, but that is not essential for capital to flow into Indian innovation, right? But what matters is, can we actually make the entire process of getting foreign capital a lot more easier? I think today, individual investors investing in India in terms of foreign capital, it's still going to be very laborious for the company, right? There has to be a lot of filing, there's to be a lot of compliance requirements that has to be done. So it makes it very difficult for individual investors or companies to reach out to individual investors and get their capital, right? It's easier for Indian capital, Indian rupee capital to come into the startup, but to get overseas capital to come into the startup at very small amounts, there's significant amount of transaction cost, right? So if there are certain elements that can be addressed, I think we should not be really concerned about, it's a concern that people are moving out of the country, but at least from a capital flow perspective, we can kind of be assured that we can still be able to attract global capital in the country.
So here, one more question. I think Indians repatriate around $18 billion from US to India, the Indian Americans. I think it's $18 billion, which is quite a sizable amount. Do you prefer that the foreign capital which flows in also repatriates the profits back to the countries from where they're originating, if I'm correct? So do you think that there is more value of Indian wealth being invested in India, or it's equally desirable or non-desirable to have foreign investments into startups? What is your, not just from the funding perspective, but from the perspective of prosperity of the people? And this is the first part. The second part is, do you think Indian investors need education on the startup ecosystem? Because a lot of foreign funds are there in India, so they are very well educated about India, I'm very sure. But do you think Indian investor needs education? And because YNOS is a great platform for getting educated for people like me.
I think if I really look at the first question, ideally, we'd like to have as much domestic capital as possible. It's not that, venture funds or startup founders are averse to taking domestic capital. The question is, adequate availability of domestic capital was not there so far, right? So therefore, when people started looking for capital, they had to look at overseas sources of capital, right? But today, I think there are a lot of efforts being done to increase domestic investors contributing to many of these venture funds and many of investing in startups. So I think over a period of time, I think that will be taken care of, right? The second is, I think you're talking about
education of Indian investors.
Yeah, I mean, today I think there are enough networks that are available, informal, formal networks. But then there is always scope for, so many of these people are not common investors. They're all high net worth individuals, right? People who are investing in startups, they're high net worth individuals, mostly knowledgeable investors, well educated, right? So they have in some sense their own sources of information, right? But it's just that there is always a certain amount of hesitancy when you actually take the first step, right? I think it will take time. So our Startup India movement started in 2016, right? We are 2025. As a nation, we are in a hurry. We're not even a decade old in terms of growing up the ecosystem, right? US has been growing this ecosystem right from the Second World War, right? So you're all talking about 80 years, right? So the leapfrog that we have done in a span of 9 to 10 years is phenomenal, right? And I think if we continue in this trend, I think we'll possibly be doing very well in the next couple of decades.
A simple, honest question with a simple timeline. If you want to attach a number to it, in one of your podcasts, you mentioned that India, YNOS is there to get India to 1 lakh or maybe 5 lakh startups. Was that annually 5 lakh startups or like over a period of time?
No, I'm talking about 5 lakh startups, yes.
Annually?
Annually, yes.
Wonderful. What do you think is a number that you want to put in that YNOS is going to facilitate 5 lakh startups in like how many years from now?
Well, we would like to say possibly in a year from now, but
okay. I wish you the best for that. I really want to hear that. I'm glad that you gave me this answer. So I'm going to be the mouthpiece of YNOS, wherever I go.
Thank you.
I'll ask people to check this. You have a daughter who wants to do around the world in 80 days. So that's what you also mentioned in one of the podcasts. So does she know the impact you're bringing with your project? Is she aware of the impact you're bringing, or you are like a father who only listens to her dreams? Just tell me something about your personal life.
Oh, thank you so much. I think, the work that I do is something that, she's not fully aware of.
Okay.
Yeah. But then she keeps hearing from others that, this portal is there. So she kinds of comes and, pulls my leg that I've got about this from others. So,
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to send this link to her also.
Sure.
Thank you, Professor Rajan. It's wonderful. I think you are one of the pillars of the Indian startup ecosystem. I wish you all the best, and I think you're doing a great job. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for your time. Pleasure meeting you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On behalf of Sangam Business, I'm here with Professor Thillai Rajan at IIT Chennai at his office. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.